What's up guys, welcome back to Tech Tutor. In today's video, we're going to be going over what's known as an ER model. If you're taking a database class and come across doing an ER model, you'll definitely want to look at today's video and see how we actually do a ER model for a real world question, right? Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be looking at the missing persons database. The missing person database is what is going to give us information about a missing person, the evidence, the suspect, all that information, what a user might want to see. Now, before we start even thinking, what is an ER model? An ER model diagram is one that is a high-level representational model that that takes into account user needs. So what does the user require, right? And we analyze that and we put together this beautiful diagram known as the ER model diagram. So this is the question. I've already underlined some things. So what I've underlined, the first thing we need to do is skim over the question. Look at data. What's the data that's kind of popping out? If you look over here, I'm kind of seeing missing person cases. Okay, so that's something we need to record. When people go missing, okay, time, name. So this looks like a set of data, right? Events, facts, evidence, suspect, blood DNA. So all these things is something we need to underline before we even start drawing our diagram, right? And one thing you need to note is I've not underlined over here where it says I can make a list of missing people when missing in the last 2 years, including their case status. Case status we might need, we'll see. I'm just going to underline that as data, but making a list, right? That kind of sounds like an output, It's kind of like a output. So one note I've made here, ER models do not have outputs, okay? They do not have views if you've been learning database terminology, right? So first thing, skim over the question, look at what data pieces you would need. Then next step, ask yourself, what are the entities going to be? Okay, so the entities in our model are you can think of entities as tables inside our database. Okay, tables that are gonna have a set of attributes, right? Entities have attributes, right? Attributes are the data elements, the atomic data elements. What do they have, right? So entities, think of it like think of it like a group of attributes. Okay, a table that has these attributes. Okay, let's look. So from what this question looks like, a missing person database, and then looking at this question also with the requirements of this, from that I see we have three main attributes. One is the three main entities. Case. Okay, we need a case entity. Why I'm underlining this is because this is how the entity is going to look in our database diagram. Then we would need a person, right, to talk about that. Looking at this, right, you see how this has a set of distinct attributes: person and evidence. What is the evidence? So make sure you have this capitalized when we're going to put in our database diagram. So evidence is going to hold, you see over here, blood or DNA evidence, number of evidences collected, right? So that kind of stands out to me, when I'm looking in our database diagram. Okay, next step is start putting down our database. Let me move this down. Start putting down our ER model. Like, what does our ER model look like? Okay, so I'm gonna move this to the side over here. Okay, I'm gonna start with case first, because case looks like the main entity. So case entity. So entity, we put it in a box, capitalize it. Okay, case. Okay, from what do we need to know about a case? So we need to know the case status. I think I saw the case status somewhere right over here. That's something we would need to do. So I extend a line. Okay, I put case status. And how do we put an attribute? We circle. Like, it's not, if you think of it like circling, you could call it a oval structure. Okay, case status. Okay, so but we also need to know the when the case was opened, right? That's something I would want to know. Is if the case and entity are whatever, we're gonna have case. We're gonna have a case open date. I'm gonna call it case open date. Next step is I'm gonna put. I would need some ID, right? Right. I would want to identify some ID. So I would need the ID of the. I would need the ID of the missing person. Of course, I want to identify them somehow, right? But remember what I said. I would want a person's entity, right? So I'm thinking we should have an ID. An ID as the primary key. That's another thing we gotta think about. Primary key and foreign key. Okay, so for missing person ID, I'm gonna show why this would be. We can have multiple missing persons, right? Missing person IDs. So I'm gonna put them as, what is a double oval? A double oval means it could be multi-valued, right? So you would need a missing person ID, but you would see why this would be a foreign key. Okay, so bear with me for now. I'm gonna do dashes. So dashes means it's a foreign key. Okay, we're going back to our database terminology. Dashes means it's a foreign key. So this is gonna be both a foreign key and a multi-valued attribute. Now, why did I say it's a multi-valued attribute again? It's because we can have many missing persons IDs, right? That could be multi-valued. And the same thing goes for witness IDs. We're gonna have witness ID. That could be, we can have multiple witness IDs, right? And then this is gonna be a foreign key also. And then we're gonna also have suspect IDs, right? We have a suspect in our case, right? Suspect IDs. Okay, I'm gonna circle because we're gonna have multiple suspects. It could be a multi-valued attribute, right? And I'm gonna make this a foreign key also. Okay, now this diagram is kind of messy. You can make sure this doesn't overlap, right? This is just to get the idea passed, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of connect this. We're gonna have person's entity, right? We're gonna have a person's entity. I would recommend doing the attributes later, but I just wanted to show how the attributes look like. Now, between our person's entity and our case, right? We have a relationship. This diamond you see, that's going to be a relationship. So this is, I'm also going to have a person entity here. So I'm going to put a person entity. In the case, I'm going to connect that to evidence. Okay, so this is going to be the evidence entity. Okay, and this is going to be the relationship. We do not need a relationship between evidence and person. Let's kind of keep this diagram simple. So what we're gonna do is say case. What should be between case and person? What could we put as a relationship? So we could do a word like involves. You could do any word you want, but it has to make sense, right? So case involves person, right? Now, if we think about case and evidence, I have to ask myself, would I want to enter an evidence if it's not associated with a case? No, right? I would. So, well, in that case, what we would do is make this a weak entity. Okay, I'm going to make this a weak entity. So a weak entity in database terminology is one that could not be entered. It's dependent on another entity. As you can see, evidence is dependent on the case. So I cannot enter evidence if I've not entered case. And one more thing before I forget, I gotta make sure I have that diamond, right? Make sure I have that diamond. So let me erase and make sure I have my diamond. Okay, make sure I have my diamond. So diamond is gonna have contains, so case contains. I'm gonna say case contains evidence, right? That makes sense, right? And okay, I hope you're seeing how we're kind of doing this. And this is gonna be And this is, and I'm gonna also put a double diamond for over here. Remember, a double diamond is one in which we're kind of saying this has to be entered at least once in our database. Okay, when I'm creating an evidence record, right? When I'm creating an evidence record, it has to be associated with a case. Otherwise, we're not going to enter it. That's kind of what we're saying. Okay? So as you can see, that's what kind of like the attributes looks like. I've put down one entity, person, case involves person, case contains evidence. Okay, so case is kind of like the main parent, you would say. But I wouldn't call it a parent, but it's kind of like the main thing that we want to see first when we're looking at this database, right? So case involves person, case contains evidence. Now let's look at what the person attributes would look like. Okay, so and as I was saying, we have a foreign key here, right? Where is that foreign key coming from? That's coming from the person ID. Okay, and when we're doing the primary key, we underline, we don't do dash. So this is the primary key. If two entities are connected to each other, we should remember that a primary key should match the foreign key and another entity. Okay, and as you will see, we're gonna have a primary key in evidence. Okay, that will that should kind of be we should have a foreign key, and we should and that should kind of link the entity. So an entity connected to another entity must have a primary key and a foreign key relationship. Remember that one. Okay, so this is our primary key. Okay, now next what we would do is I'm thinking we could also have another set of attributes, because if we go back to the question, if you look, we have a couple of things: the name, age, gender. They went missing, right? So person ID. Okay, person ID. Then we would also want to have a case ID. Okay, so because why would I need a case ID, right? The case ID would be to map that specific person can have many cases associated with them, right? So case ID, since we are kind of mapping this from the case, right? From this, I'm gonna call it a foreign attribute, right? And let's go back to, I don't think we didn't do a primary key. So the primary key for our case is gonna be case ID. So case ID is our primary key, and that's gonna map to our case ID as a foreign key. Okay, that's gonna be a foreign key. So that kind of, you see how we're making sure we have a primary key mapped to a foreign key, primary key mapped to a foreign key. Check. Next, look at the gender. We need the gender, we need the birth date. Let me turn the lights on. 1 second. Birth date, and we need. I would also have the blood type. Remember the blood type of a specific person. We would also need a blood type for the evidence, right? But this is the blood type for a specific person. We would need the name, right? Remember, that's name. But when we're entering name, are we gonna enter the full name and last name? Yeah. So I'm gonna call it F name and L name. Alright guys, we're gonna continue in part 2 of this, but feel free to leave down any questions you might have. This is what our ER model looks so far. We still have attributes to add. We have cardinality, right? I'm gonna mention some things so that you might look into them. Cardinality, min-max. Min-max we go over here, and cardinality. And completing this diagram, and hopefully you learned something about what an ER model is and how do we even construct one. Alright guys, I'll see you in part 2. Thank you, and please like, share, and